Hello everybody, I am back with another video as it pertains to the 2020-2021 NFL postseason. And for this video I'm going to give a brief recap of all the action and excitement and fun that happened in round one. Especially the game between the Browns and the Steelers. That was rather exciting, wasn't it? There were some upsets, a couple of games that weren't even close, and a couple that made you wonder, how could this have happened? I'll go into that in a moment. Speaking of the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers game, let's start off with that one. If ever there came a time where an entire city felt like rising as one and celebrating Baker Mayfield planting the figurative Cleveland Browns flag on the Pittsburgh Steelers logo at Heinz Field, it was last night. And if there even is such a thing, the football gods, they decided from the very first play from scrimmage in the game, a high-centered snap for Ben Roethlisberger from Marquise Pouncey that was recovered for a touchdown by Carl Joseph. I mean, you're not even 16 seconds into the game, and the Cleveland Browns are already up 7-0. Well, 6-0, and then after the extra point, but you know what I mean. It makes you wonder or think that so many of the ghosts of yesteryear that have haunted the Cleveland Browns have finally been shooed away. And one of them in the form of Ben Roethlisberger. So many of them in the quote-unquote haunted house known as Heinz Field. I mean, it was rather remarkable. And apparently the supposed football gods, if there are any, they were all decked out in orange, white, and brown on this night, so it was as if Ben Roethlisberger, he went 47 for 68, 501 yards, 4 interceptions, and 4 touchdowns. It looked like Ben Roethlisberger was seeing ghosts that were making him look older at 38 than what Tom Brady does at 43. Against the Cleveland Browns, he's 23, 3-1 now. And this was a team that originally didn't want to draft him 16 years ago. I remember looking at some of the message boards with when those were big at the time on the internet as far as mock drafts. A bunch of people had for the Cleveland Browns in 2004 draft this guy out of the University of Miami, Ohio, by the name of Ben Roethlisberger. He's the future of our franchise. Ben Roethlisberger ends up going to Pittsburgh instead. But going back to this game, though, it's sometimes difficult to remember that the Cleveland Browns were at one point in time the franchise of Paul Brown, Jim Brown, Otto Graham, and a host of other players. Rather extensive players, to tell you the truth, on that list. But even without their head coach, who was in quarantine due to COVID-19, the Cleveland Browns still managed to pull off a, in my opinion, historical victory. More so because the Cleveland Browns, the last time they won a playoff game was on New Year's Day in 1995. And back then they had Vinny Testaverde as their quarterback and Bill Belichick as their head coach. I was going to go into the story about the Steelers and the Cleveland Browns in January of 2003, but I did that in my preview video last week. The playoff game that happened on January 3rd of 2003, but Cleveland hadn't returned to the postseason up until Sunday night. And as far as games at Heinz Field, they had lost 17 straight games. And this is also coming from the same team that in 2017 ended up going 0-16. The 2017-2018 Cleveland Browns ended up being the second team in 9 years to go 0-16. The first one was the 2008-2009 Detroit Lions. Both teams went 4-0 in the preseason and 0-16 in the regular season. But be that as it may, though, Cleveland's got to get ready to go into Arrowhead Stadium to take on a refreshed and well-rested Kansas City Chiefs team. With Andy Reid calling the plays on the sidelines, you have Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back, Mecole Hardman Jr. and Sammy Watkins at wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, and of course, one of my guys, number 15 at quarterback, the man himself, Patrick Mahomes Jr. Will all this extra rest and preparation be enough for Kansas City to possibly pull off a win? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe within the next day or two, when I go to do a predictions video for the AFC, I'll talk about it then. But Cleveland versus Kansas City, I personally can't wait to see that game. Or worst case scenario, I download the Cleveland Browns app and I listen to it on my phone. So that being said, let's worry about that then. Next up, if I can find it, here we are. I want to talk about the Tennessee Titans and the Baltimore Ravens game. For the first time in about 12 and a half months, not only did the Baltimore Ravens beat the Tennessee Titans, but they also managed to get their first playoff win in 6 years. The NFL's leading rusher in Derrick the King Henry. He was held to only 40 yards on 18 carries yesterday, which was he carried for approximately 2.5 yards per carry, so let's just round it up and say 3. But after a strong start, though, Ryan Tannehill finished 18 for 26 for 165 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, and with under 2 minutes left to Marcus Peters, which ended the AFC South champions of a game-tying drive, and at the same time it also capped off a dominant day for the defense of the Baltimore Ravens. But on the flip side, though, Lamar Jackson Jr. overcame a bit of a sluggish start, though, and also a surprisingly stingy Titans defense. He ended up finishing 17 for 24 with 179 yards. He added 16 carries for 136 yards to his resume and a game-changing 48-yard score in the first half. But overall, though, the Ravens finished with 35 carries for 236 yards, which was about 7 yards per carry, although their running back room combined for just 81. But what I really liked about this, as far as this game, though, the victory silenced the most vocal critics of Lamar Jackson Jr., who constantly pointed out his record as a starter in the postseason of 0-2. But the Ravens also managed to get a small measure of revenge, just like I predicted in my predictions video that I did last week. The Tennessee Titans, last year, the Tennessee Titans ended the dreams and aspirations of potentially moving further into the playoffs and a shot at the Super Bowl in Baltimore. And this season, Baltimore ended up losing in overtime in Week 11. So Baltimore manages to get the last laugh, and the way I see it, you can finally move on past the Lamar Jackson Jr. can't make it past the first round of the postseason as starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens narrative. The Ravens ended up erasing a 10-0 deficit, and the entire team got a momentous victory. The way I see it, though, Baltimore took all the discourse about their quarterback and their team, internalized it, and responded with one of the most memorable playoff wins, not only in franchise history, but also in NFL history as well. They managed to get over one hump, but the job isn't quite done just yet. The Ravens, at one point, they were actually going down the road of deja vu, if I can sum it up that way. Their offensive line was getting beat up in pass protection. They weren't running the ball very well. And through it all, they still managed to keep their heads down. They did their jobs, and they slowly worked their way back. They managed to get to the figurative finish line in a way that was hard to predict, but they still got there. And that's been the Ravens' mantra over the last couple of weeks, which has been rather simple. Finish. One mantra, one word, one mindset, and that's finish. They stared their worst fears in the eye, they survived, and now they move on to round 2, where they take on the Buffalo Bills at Ralph Wilson Stadium. So, as the name of one of my all-time favorite songs from the movie Dumb and Dumber says. Get ready. And I can rest assure you this. Both the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens will be ready. I think this game is on... I want to say this game is on Sunday. I could be wrong. If it's not Sunday, it's Saturday or the other way around. But it's going to be a fun one. Next, the Chicago Bears game against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints win 21-9, unsurprisingly. I had the Saints as a favorite at 8.5. Not that it really matters as far as when I go to do my predictions. Your point spread would be a little bit different from mine and the other way around. So, how you base your predictions. If you follow a point spread, how you base your predictions, why you think this team will win, or why if you have this team as a favorite, why do you think they'll cover the spread? If you have the other team as an underdog, why do you have that? I'm not factoring any of that into these videos. Again, I'm just giving you my predictions straight up, who will win between this team and that team. But as lopsided as this victory was, though, going back to the Saints, though, if you really think about it, this win against the Bears wasn't even that close. Not that anybody expected differently, but the Bears were an 8-8 team that backed into the playoffs. They were shorthanded. And the way I see it, they're on the verge of a significant house cleaning. If it hasn't already started yet, I'm surprised it didn't start sometime after the game was over yesterday. But only the most optimistic of Bears fans had hopes of Chicago subduing Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints in the Louisiana Superdome. And for as long as I've been watching the New Orleans Saints at home, especially with Drew Brees as the quarterback, the Saints are a different team at home. How they are on the road is one thing, but especially at home, they are a completely different team. I haven't forgotten that. Drew Brees has been with New Orleans for 14 years. This is his 14th year with the New Orleans Saints, and I haven't forgotten it once. Not one single bit. But on the other hand, it might seem nitpicky to criticize the Saints after a playoff win. One in which the defense set a franchise record by holding the Bears to 9 points, no less. But on the other hand, Drew Brees celebrates his 42nd birthday this week. I want to say it's on the 15th. So, I want to say the 15th is this upcoming Friday. I could be wrong, but if my memory serves correctly, I want to say this Friday is the 15th, and that's when his birthday will be. But it's not lost on anyone that that time is running out on Drew Brees. Drew Brees and the Saints need to make the most of every play, every game, every possession. And if they still want to get to the Super Bowl, that's what they're going to have to do. And they're not quite there. They're not there, at least not just yet. But on the other hand, this game by no means is the finished product of the New Orleans Saints, which is a good thing. Drew Brees and the New Orleans offense got off to a rather sluggish start against the Bears. I never thought I would see that, but... and what was as close to a gimme game as there is in this year's playoffs, that's what the game against the Bears was yesterday. But I think the Saints are going to need to do a little bit better in the next up-and-coming weeks, starting with the divisional game against Tom Brady in the Shipyard on Sunday night. I think that game is on Fox, too, if my memory serves right. Like 6:30 Eastern, I think, on Fox, which would be about 5:30 my time. I live in Illinois, so I want to say it would be about 5:30 my time. But be that as it may, in order to... The Saints want to move on to the next round of the postseason, which would be great. First things first, you got to travel to the Shipyard, and you got to try and take out Tom Brady. And the last time that happened, I don't remember what week it was. The last time that happened, the Saints ended up going to Tampa Bay and beating the Buccaneers 39-3 or something like that. I think that's what it was, like 38 or 39 or something. But yeah, it was a fun game. I remember watching it too. I thought this is what you'll expect between Tom Brady and Drew Brees 2 times a year. Boy, was I wrong. Next game, the Seattle Seahawks against the St. Louis Rams. If the same defense still wins championships is a thing in this new world NFL that's had record-setting offensive numbers this year, then I think you might want to keep an eye out on the St. Louis Rams during the rest of their playoff run. The Rams were the 6th seed in the NFC. They suffocated their division rivals, and they ended up winning 30-20. So who would have thought that, much like the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South, you have the Seattle Seahawks, who are the division champions in the NFC West. They go into their first game of the playoffs and they end up losing. But it was I think for the Rams, it was rather satisfying for them, because on December 27th, they lost in Seattle. And shortly afterwards, they ended up watching the Seahawks celebrate winning their division and party it up. As far as the Seahawks, though, they entered this game having won their previous 10 straight home playoff games. And Pete Carroll had been 6-0 at home in the postseason. But the perfect record is no more, and it's time for Seattle to regroup. And as we say in Chicago, better luck next season. What moves are the Seattle Seahawks going to make in the offseason? What are they going to do in the draft? I know the draft is about 3 months away, but it makes you wonder. But if ever this was an example of a revenge game for the NFL, this was it. And now the St. Louis Rams have to travel to the frozen tundra to take on a fresh, well-rested Green Bay Packers team. So how that's going to play out this Sunday, I have no idea. But we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of which, is the Packers and Rams game this Sunday? Or is it on Saturday? I don't remember. Anyway, next game on the list, the Buffalo Bills and the Indianapolis Colts. There are so many, at the end of this game, there were so many what-ifs that you could probably ask yourself. What if the Indianapolis Colts had done this differently? What if they had done that differently? I think all these what-ifs sum up the reason why their season ended prematurely on Saturday. Excuse me. The Colts were the 7th seed, and they had their chances to avoid being one and done, but the 2nd seed Bills ended up converting more of their opportunities to win a home postseason game, for the first time since 1995, and also snap a streak of 6 playoff losses. The Colts, they go into the offseason with numerous questions about how the franchise is going to look moving forward. Much like I said about the Seattle Seahawks. What do you do in the draft? What do you do in free agency? Will the Colts re-sign Phillip Rivers? Will they re-sign T.Y. Hilton and a host of other players? I think they do. I mean, T.Y. Hilton is such a, he's a key player on that roster. He's pretty much, if not the number one guy, maybe number 2 on the offense. Everyone and their mother right away, you say, name up to 6 players on the Indianapolis Colts as far as big names, in no exact order. T.Y. Hilton's going to be on that list. Phillip Rivers, I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. That's just my opinion. But going back to the draft and free agency, what positions will their general manager look to bolster in either free agency and or the draft? That's still a ways away from now, but when the Colts look back at 2020, 2021, they can accentuate the positives, but at the same time, they'll also have to think about what might have been. They can try and hide the negatives, but they'll still be there. Somehow, in some way, the Bills managed to hold on, and now they get ready to take on Baltimore. That game's going to be a lot of fun, in my opinion. Lastly, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Washington Redskins. I have to give all the kudos and the credit in the world to the Redskins. They managed to put up a fight in this one. And there were some times where I looked at the score, and I saw that Washington was winning, and I thought to myself, really, is this could the Redskins finally pull off the ultimate upset? Could they eliminate Tom Brady? That didn't turn out to be, though. It wasn't always pretty, but the Buccaneers managed to get their first playoff win since hoisting the Lombardi Trophy after the 2002-2003 season with John Gruden as their coach. They went on the road, they beat the Redskins, and Tom Brady turned on a rather vintage playoff performance, if you ask me. No interceptions, a pair of touchdown passes, and for 382 yards. But even as banged up as they were, though, the Buccaneers managed to look strong on offense, and they held a stout defense from the Redskins at bay for most of the game. Speaking of defense, that leads me to Tampa Bay, though. That's another story, because soft coverage and a lackluster pass rush made life way too easy for an opposing quarterback in Taylor Heineke, who was making his second NFL start. And I originally thought it was going to be Alex Smith playing, but it turned out not to be the case, because he ended up getting replaced by Taylor Heineke. And when I saw him take the field on Saturday night, I was like, wait a minute, who's this Heineke guy wearing the number 4? I literally had never heard of him at all, and I wouldn't have been able to pick him out of a lineup. You know, here's a guy taking over for Alex Smith, who I literally wouldn't know from a hole in the wall, and he's going to be playing for him? I don't think so. That side of the ball, though, is going to need plenty of improvement on defense if Tampa Bay still wants to keep advancing in the playoffs. Granted, this wasn't the cleanest effort in all phases, but the Buccaneers still have plenty of work to do if they want to win the next playoff game, no matter who it is that they face. But a road win in the postseason was worth plenty, regardless of who it came against. Tampa Bay moving on in the playoff race for the first time in nearly 20 years. And when you have numbers 12 and 87 on your roster, it's pretty much a given that they're gonna make the postseason and make it past the first round, and maybe even go all the way to the NFC Championship or even the Super Bowl. Who knows? But the fact that you also have players like Mike Evans and Vontae David making huge contributions, that's rather fitting. So the way I see it, seeing as the New Orleans Saints are my number 2 favorite team, I say bring on Tampa Bay, because we are ready for it. We beat the Buccaneers. We beat the Buccaneers in the Shipyard once already. Something tells me that it happens again, but I'm not gonna go into that until I get ready to do my predictions videos, and those will be coming up within the next day or two. So keep an eye out for my predictions videos for round 2. Let me know what you think about round 1. Feel free to subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram, and let me know what you guys think. What do you think is going to happen in the Super Bowl? Who's going to go where? Who's going to beat who if you already have a bracket made up? Let me know what you think. I want to hear your predictions. You won't hear mine again for another day or two, because I want to do 2 separate videos. But be that as it may, I think you'll like them when they finally come up. So give a thumbs up, subscribe, drop a comment, continue the showing support for my channel, and I will talk to you guys whenever that time is. So in the meantime, keep an eye out for more content in the future. Be well, stay safe, and may the best teams win. Have a good night.